It's just one thing after another in Newberg. First, the debate over Black Lives Matter and pride flags in schools. Then, a group of students created a so-called slave trade over Snapchat. And now, a staff member actually showed up to work in blackface to protest the vaccine mandate for teachers.
But it really is hard to fathom that somebody would go to these lengths in order to make a political point.
Speaking of that, it turns out that Oregon and Washington are the only states where teachers can get fired for not being vaccinated.
Getting the vaccine will be a condition of employment.
Here's the story.
Hello, Monday. What a way to start the week. So this is the story. Hopefully you guys all understand how this works at this point. If you don't, look, we're not the type of show that covers the car crashes and the house fires and things like that. We want to cover the big issues, the things that are a little harder to talk about sometimes, the things that have some nuance to them, and we want to give them to you in a rich and robust enough way for you to truly have a good opinion. So when you have one, which I know you do, please let us know what you're thinking. Use that hashtag HeyDan on Twitter or email us at thestory@kgw.com. Let's get going here. And I don't want to belabor it. All right, I'm not gonna beat around the bush, or neither of those things. Let's get right into the big story tonight. Here's the headline that broke the news today. Newberg school staffer shows up in blackface. Yes, blackface. And wait until you hear the details. Here's how Ryan Clarke with the Newberg Graphic summed it up.
So this woman who did the blackface, she used iodine. Is that correct? Am I reading that right?
That is my understanding, yes. The staff member who witnessed it and walked up to her when this occurred, she explained that she used iodine to darken her face. She explained that she wanted to look like Rosa Parks, and she explained that the reason for it was the vaccine mandate for staff members at schools throughout Newberg.
It's a lot to take in, I know. And it brings us to our news segment. What? Huh? I mean, but why? So the school district had a news conference today to try and explain what happened, kind of. Apparently, a teacher's aide for special education at Mabel Elementary thinks that the vaccine mandate infringes on her rights and considers herself a modern-day Rosa Parks. So she darkened her skin with dye. I know. It makes absolutely no sense. We don't know what she was thinking. I mean, she hasn't come out and explained herself at all. I mean, I guess we can guess it's at least one of two things, that either she was being overtly and openly racist, or she truly didn't know how racist that was. I mean, to do that at all is mind-blowing. To do it right now, amidst the controversy in that community surrounding race and inclusiveness, is too much to try and even rationalize, honestly. For months, the school board has been trying to ban teachers from hanging pride flags or Black Lives Matter signs in their classrooms or any political symbols, but those are the two that spurred the ban. And some parents came out and said, well, that ban is either bigoted or ignorant, saying that the board doesn't seem to understand how difficult it is for some LGBTQ students or some students of color in Newberg. Now, the diversity in their schools mirrors the diversity that we see in their community as a whole. Only 1% of the student body is black in Newberg. For every black student, there are more than 70 white students. And we've heard accounts like this from black parents.
Black students and other students of color are under attack in Newberg schools. I know this to be true because my son was called a at school. But I also know it to be true because as one of the advisors to the Black Student Union, I had a black male student share with me that he was called the N-word so much at Newberg High School that he made the request to leave his classes early in order to avoid being called or hearing that word in the hallway. For that student, seeing a Black Lives Matter sign hanging in a classroom helped him identify which teachers were safe for him to talk to.
But the school board stuck to its guns there, and so did their supporters. See, they think that the BLM signs and the pride flags contribute to the divisiveness, not help break those barriers down, and that they say racism is not an underlying issue in Newberg, even after the whole Snapchat slave trade thing. Yeah, remember that last week? When we learned that students had created a Snapchat group where they joked about buying and selling their black classmates. I could go into detail here, but you'd probably get sick to your stomach, so I'll spare you. Now look, typically when you see children, kids, young teenagers being racist in such a public, hurtful, and demeaning way, you do have to consider the depth of the issues in this community in Newberg. But still, many parents continue to deny that racism is a problem there.
And I completely reject the claim parroted by a few with no evidence that there is, quote, deep racism in Newberg.
That doesn't mean that the town is some horrible systemically racist thing. And everybody that keeps making this claim never ever gives any evidence of it. Never. It's just all hyperbole.
Well, I present exhibit blackface. Blackface. And how can you ignore the layers to this thing? You have a white woman using a racist trope to explain why she feels marginalized in a community that is currently ignoring the voices of black families concerned with racism. That is a layered onion, and it's a lot for the community to consider.
I'm curious, how is the community reacting to this news?
They're outraged, and rightfully so. This is a horrifically racist incident. And many people are also deeply embarrassed and worried about what this will do to the reputation of Newberg around the state and, frankly, around the country. This was already the issues that were facing Newberg in the way of their school board situation and previous racist incidents that affected the community had created a perception of Newberg from the outside as this backward racist town. And I don't think that's particularly fair personally. I think that the vast majority of folks in Newberg are kind, welcoming people who abhor this type of behavior.
I know there's a fine line between what you just said and the outlier argument that these situations, while terrible, are this tiny little fraction of outliers in the community, and they don't represent a broader systemic issue. Are you hearing from the people who make that argument in regards to what just happened with this blackface incident?
Yes, and I'm sure there are going to be people who attempt to explain it away, but I think it's on the community itself and on Oregonians and Americans to look in the mirror and understand that the conversations we're having politically, either by politicians themselves or among each other or on the internet, are going to inevitably bleed into real life and result in incidents like this.
And I'm curious what you think about it. So please let me know. Use that hashtag #HeyDan. I'll read some of the comments at the end of the show tonight. But I want to end this little segment here with some brief commentary for the school board on what kind of started this whole conversation on signs. And I wanted to just express to them and ask them a question that, you know, this isn't about signs, right? I mean, do you get that? Not about like physical. Let me put it this way. You could hang BLM signs in every single classroom. Hell, wallpaper the school with them if you want to. But if you still have students creating slave trade Snapchat groups and staff showing up in blackface like it's no big deal and people saying that there's no evidence of racism in Newberg, what difference does a sign make? You want to take the signs away? Do it. I actually see the value in that. I get it. Keep politics out of the classroom, fine. But don't ignore why people are fighting to keep them up. It's not because they like posters. It's because they feel ignored and powerless and unsafe. So if you don't think signs are the right path, then propose a new one. But if you still think that the words Black Lives Matter are at the root of your problem, you have to see the irony. Now, let's circle back for a second to what apparently sparked this racist blackface protest: vaccine mandates for teachers. In Oregon and Washington, teachers now have less than a month to get vaccinated, or they could lose their jobs. But we were wondering, how does that compare to other states outside of our area? Kristen Severance looked into it in tonight's Verify.
We get a lot of your questions about vaccine mandates in Oregon and Washington, especially when it comes to K through 12 school staff. A lot of people are wondering how Oregon's policy compares to the rest of the country, like this email from Kay Calhoun. So they ask, is Oregon the only state that will fire educators for not getting the COVID vaccine? Okay, we looked into this, and no, Oregon is not the only state where educators could lose their jobs if they don't get vaccinated. Washington Governor Jay Inslee announced a similar policy in August.
Getting the vaccine will be a condition of employment. This will be a condition of employment.
All K through 12 staff in Oregon and Washington have until October 18th to get fully vaccinated, or their jobs are at risk. But how does that compare to the rest of the country? Well, the vaccine mandates in the Pacific Northwest appear to be the strictest in the U.S. So right now, these 9 states are the only states that require teachers to get vaccinated or submit to weekly testing. But remember, here in Oregon and Washington, there is no testing option.
Similarly to our state employment requirements, there will be no test out option available.
All other states we found allow teachers to remain unvaccinated if they get that weekly test. And we're talking about statewide mandates. A lot of cities have their own local mandates, and in some cases, those requirements are more strict and don't allow for weekly testing. And again, the mandates in Oregon and Washington only apply to K through 12 staff. Students, right now, students 12 and older who are eligible to receive the vaccine are not required to be vaccinated at this time. So what happens if a school district decides not to follow the rule? Well, they could be fined. Here's what the director of the Oregon Department of Education had to say.
The Oregon Health Authority has authority in state statute to levy civil penalties against a school district or an employer who fails to follow these requirements.
Earlier this month, President Biden announced vaccine mandates for federal employees and employers with 100 or more workers. That rule will apply to school staff in some states, but those details are still being worked out. If you have questions about the COVID vaccine or state mandates, let us know. All you have to do is email us at verify@kgw.com.
All right, Kristen, thank you. Let's count some vaccines. Take a look at who's vaccinated and how many people are yet to be vaccinated. More than 2.78 million people in the state of Oregon have been vaccinated with at least one shot, and that includes even kids under 12, making up roughly 66% of the population. In Washington, more than 5.35 million people have gotten at least their first dose, which works out to be more than 70% of their state's entire population, including kids. All right, from one big topic to another, I want to discuss Portland's ongoing problem with gun violence. The city has seen more than 870 shootings so far this year, a record number of homicides. And last week, the mayor and the police chief, they both spoke and outlined their new strategies for addressing this violence, including rehiring retired officers to fill staffing shortages and expanding the street response team to free up police from dealing with mental health calls. Well, over the weekend, another member of the city council added his voice to the conversation. Commissioner Mingus Mapps wrote an op-ed for the Oregonian with 4 proposals to stop the record high shootings. First, he thinks the police bureau needs more officers. He thinks that they should work to recruit new hires and do it now. And he didn't mention the mayor's plan to rehire retired officers. Mapps also says something should be done to increase police morale and community trust in the force. He says the first step for doing that is to immediately put body cameras on officers. More on that part in just a minute. His third proposal is in line with the mayor's to expand the street response team. And lastly, Mapps says Portland needs to recognize and address the gang problem fueling these shootings by working to stop retaliatory violence before it happens. But let's take a second to dig a little bit deeper on one of these points. See, Kyla Boshi has been following this discussion around body cameras on Portland police officers for years now, really. Kyle, answer this. Is Portland any closer to getting those body cams?
Well, I'd say there does seem to be growing support at City Hall. We emailed city commissioners today to kind of get a sense on where everyone stands. And here's the breakdown. Obviously, Commissioner Mapps, as you mentioned, he's supportive. Commissioner Carmen Rubio is too. She told me, quote, I support body cameras coupled with the robust accountability measures that make camera footage an effective tool toward transparency. So there's two who support body cams, along with Portland Mayor Ted Wheeler. In August, he told the police bureau to start researching equipment, get some bids, and figure out if there's any federal grant money available. The other two commissioners, Joanne Hardesty and Dan Ryan, we're not sure about where they stand. Hardesty has changed her tone in recent months, though. Before, she was adamantly against them and questioned whether body cams were effective. Now, she appears to be warming up to the idea and thinks body cams should be part of the discussion as part of a settlement agreement with the U.S. Department of Justice over police use of force and training. As for Commissioner Ryan, we really don't know. He didn't get back to me by deadline.
So it does sound like things are moving forward. But again, we've heard this sort of stuff before. As you've reported before, Portland is the largest police department in the country right now that doesn't have body cameras on its officers.
Right. We've certainly seen this before. The city has explored police body cams for nearly a decade now, but those efforts stalled out because of a lack of money, politics, and other things. One factor to consider, though, the city is currently in contract negotiations with the Portland Police Association, and body cams are being discussed as part of union negotiations. The police union has long supported equipping officers with body-worn cameras, so we'll wait and see.
Got it. Kyle, thank you.
Let's talk about two different maps. One is the new Oregon congressional map that state lawmakers are trying to agree on right now, and it might have a big impact on who represents you on the national level. The other is Oregon's drought map, which has just gotten worse and worse throughout the summer. The question is, did this weekend's rain even make a dent in it? When the story continues.
No surprise. Lots of opinions, lots of comments on Newberg. Please keep them coming. I mean, some of them are just, I think, venting. People want to get things off their chest. Tell me what you think about the issue there, what you think about me commenting at all on it whatsoever. Please keep those coming. And if you have something more considerate, I think, to add that might further investigate or cause us to investigate this story, please write that kind of stuff in too. You can email us at thestory@kgw.com or use the hashtag HeyDan on Twitter. I also want to remind you about our Hey Help campaign. This week, we're asking you to consider donating to Girls Inc. of the Pacific Northwest. They work with schools to help support and empower girls through mentoring and after-school groups. If you want to help them out, they could use the help. Just open up the camera on your phone, aim that at the QR code on your screen. It'll take you to a donation page. You can also go to kgw.com/heyhelp. And this is a micro donation drive, so you don't have to give some big amount of money. It all adds up. Small amounts of money, those help just as well. So thank you. Now, today was the day Oregon lawmakers were supposed to come together for a special session to vote on the new redistricting maps for Congress and state legislative districts. Well, they did meet, but they did not reach an agreement, at least not yet. I mean, given the divide in Salem over the past few years, that's really not that much of a surprise, but here is what did happen. The Senate Redistricting Committee has a Democratic majority, so they passed the maps on party lines. Same thing happened in the full Senate, but it's a little messier in the House. Both parties got an equal number of members on the House Redistricting Committee as part of a deal made earlier this year. Well, Republicans don't like the new congressional map and are accusing Democrats of gerrymandering. Since it doesn't seem like it's going to pass that committee, House Speaker Tina Kotek is pulling the nuclear option. She has created a brand new committee made up of 2 Democrats and 1 Republican to pass the congressional map. And that's exactly what they did just a bit ago. So that's where things stand right now. Lawmakers will meet again tomorrow, but it's always possible that Republicans will walk out like we've seen them do before. In the meantime, we had Pat Doors put together a little explainer on this whole process and why you need to care about it.
On the federal level, Oregon is getting another representative in Congress because our population grew. It's the first time in 40 years that's happened. That new representative needs a district and people to represent. The task of drawing that new district allows map makers to change all the other district boundaries as well. And that should matter to you. Because if, for example, you love trees and right now you're grouped with a bunch of other voters who also love trees and your representative loves trees, you have a voice in Congress. But what if under the new map and new district boundaries, you're suddenly lumped in with a bunch of different voters and they love flowers more than trees? In fact, they don't like trees at all, and they elect someone who loves flowers more than trees. Now your voice is ignored. See how that works? Under federal rules, each district in the state has to have the same population size, give or take 1 person. How's that for exacting? It's important not just to you, but also to the political parties. And to them, even more importantly, it's not about how many people, it's about how those people vote. Each side wants to protect what they have and maybe erode the other side a bit. In Oregon, that means Democrats want many of the new districts connected to the highly Democratic voting Portland area. Here's their proposed congressional map. See how many parts of the map touch the greater Portland area? According to the blog 538, it creates 5 mostly safe seats for them in Congress and 1 safe seat for Republicans, covering much of eastern Oregon. The Republican proposal for the district shrinks the 1st and 3rd districts and keeps them in Washington and Multnomah counties, basically bottling up all those Democratic votes. It keeps the 2nd district roughly the same and safe for Republicans, but the other 3 districts would be highly competitive and give Republicans a shot at maybe winning those, according to 538. Lawmakers are also redrawing maps for state legislative districts, and the same pressures and opportunities apply. If they cannot agree on a new map, Secretary of State Shemia Fagan, a Democrat, will take over the legislative map process, and a panel of judges will take over the congressional maps.
Pat Doris reporting there. Now, if political maps aren't your thing, how about some weather maps? All the weather map people are like, oh, thank goodness.
Love that. This
is the U.S. Drought Monitor's latest map of Oregon. You can see it shows the entire state. Red is typically not good, all right, no matter what map is on. Well, geez, after a political story, that makes people upset, doesn't it?
Easy.
Yeah, didn't mean that. I was talking about, like, the severity of things.
The lack of blue does not mean that we're,
exactly
anti-one party.
Right. Jeez, I can already read the emails in my head. So most of the state is dealing with some type of drought. Some of it is an extreme drought. Now, this was released last week before we got all the rain that we just got, which was wonderful to get. Chief Meteorologist Matt Zaffino joining us now. Did that rain, I know what the answer is probably going to be, but did it help us at all in the grand scheme of things?
What do you think?
I'm going to say no.
It does help us.
Okay, well, I'm happily wrong.
Yeah, no, exactly. But you were sort of on the right track, because the thing to remember about drought is you don't get into a drought over a weekend.
Right.
We're not going to get out of a drought over one rainy weekend. It is a long-term condition, usually defined by a multi-year lack of precipitation, which is what we are dealing with. But let's start with what we got this weekend. And certainly this was good news. A lot of rain. Elkhorn Mountain, that's up in Clarke County, 6.64 inches of rain. Portland, this was our wettest weekend of the year. Second place was January 2nd and 3rd, which is no surprise. That's usually one of our wettest times of the year, right around New Year's. But this weekend was way wetter than that. So it was our wettest weekend of the year. Probably, I'll check this, probably our wettest 2-day period of the year. Second maybe to that mid-January rainstorm that we had that was rather epic. Look at Vancouver, 3.2 inches of rain. Astoria, over 2.5 inches of rain. Cougar, Washington, 3.75 inches of rain. Down in Lane County, the Lane County Cascades east of Eugene, 4.5 inches of rain. So this is exactly what we need to help us begin to get out of drought. But let's look at some longer-term numbers. We'll go back to October 1st. So this is nearly a year, and in fact, we call this the water year. If you look at our rainfall total from October 1 of a given year to September 30th of the following year, we call that the water year. And the reason we look at that time period as opposed to the calendar year, we look at that too. But this is actually a better indication of how we've done, because it incorporates and encompasses one complete storm season. If you use the calendar year, you're catching the last half of one storm season and then the beginning of the next storm season, so it's not as good of a metric. So we're looking at this, and this is timely anyway since we're in late September now. Portland running a deficit since October 1st of last year of over 7 inches of rain. Same story all around the state. Pendleton, 3.5 inch deficit. Of course, the averages for Pendleton, Redmond, and Klamath Falls are way less than they are here in Portland. But look, everybody's running a deficit. And in Northern California, Mount Shasta, nearly an 18-inch deficit. So this is an indication of what we're dealing with here. And this is after the rain that we got this weekend. So again, the point being, drought is a long-term conditions. Here's the drought monitor map once again. You can see the dark red here, exceptional drought. Did it make a dent? Yes, it made a dent, but that's all it did. I mean, that's all you can hope for over a weekend, is to make a dent. This is going to take weeks, if not months, seasons, to get out of the drought. Now, going forward, you see, we don't really have much rain coming the next week, so we can blow past that. But look at the Cascades. The rainfall helped with something else, too. No smoke. So all of the fires in the Northwest and Northern California got a good dose of rain. That is certainly good news. Looking ahead into October, this is from NOAA and this Climate Prediction Center. Notice above average precipitation forecast here in the Northwest for the month of October. That's good. That'll make a bigger dent if we can actually do that. And then seasonally, we're going into another La Nina winter. That is also good news typically for the Northwest. Now, every La Nina is different, but what this is cooler than average ocean temperatures down here in the eastern Pacific near the equator. And what that usually means is a wet, cool Northwest winter with lots of mountain snow, especially from central Oregon northward. Southern Oregon and California, they don't always do so well during a La Nina, so I am concerned about that, Dan. But this was a great start this weekend. It made a dent, and it got us off in the right direction.
I'll take the dent. Thanks, Matt. Appreciate it. Now keep sending in those questions and comments to the story at kgw.com. We have some time. I'll address a few next. Couple of quick comments. This one coming in from Karen asking about the staffer in Newberg who did blackface in protest of the vaccine mandate. How do you get iodine out of your skin? Is that toxic? That's what she used, apparently, is iodine. I wondered the same thing. I looked it up. I think it's toxic to eat. I don't know about putting it on your skin in small doses, but it doesn't come off with soap and water. I mean, you have to use like alcohol and some other compounds to like get it to come off. It can stain your skin, so whew, think about that. All right. Eileen also said, Dan and crew, thank you for covering the state legislature. It gets way too little coverage. I knew it. I knew I had some politics nerds out there. We're counting on it. Keep questions coming. It's an important topic. Thanks for being with us tonight. I'm out of time. Talk to you tomorrow.